Hey guys, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. So this is going to be episode 7 of my Drawn into Narnia series, and today we're going to be discussing a certain theme that C.S. Lewis uses around some of the gender dynamics in the books. Now, I was actually asked to do a video on Narnian gender dynamics quite a while ago by Naomi's Bookshelf, and I've been putting it off until now because I'm actually quite terrified of discussing this kind of thing. Not because I don't care, actually the opposite. It's a subject I'm very passionate about and I don't want to mishandle it. So I'm not going to be discussing the totality of the gender dynamics in the Narnian books. Instead, I'm going to be focusing in on one particular role that women in these books often play, and that is the role of the guide. Now, I'm not saying that men don't do this. There are male characters who do this, quite a lot actually, but I seem to see it more with the women than the men. And also, this is not the only role women fulfill, of course. Fortunately, I would have much bigger issues with these books than I do if that were the case. And I will be discussing the books in release date order here rather than chronological order. Both orders have their merit. I find I just personally prefer the release date order just because it tonally makes more sense to me. So, the first book in this order is Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and the first time we see this trope popping up is when Lucy first appears in Narnia. She is the one who discovers Narnia. She's the one who kind of leads the rest of her siblings there. First we see her leading Edmund to Narnia, unintentionally, but she does lead him to Narnia. And then later on she does the same for Peter and Susan, although that's in a slightly different scenario, but it's done ultimately through Lucy. That's the first way they find out about it, and if she hadn't found Narnia, chances are the rest of them wouldn't have either, or it would have been very different if they had. In the next book, Prince Caspian, it's actually even more blatant, because at that point Lucy is directly telling the group she's with, her siblings and Trumpkin, no, we can't go down, we have to go up because I can see Aslan there. And they do eventually do what she wants, but yeah, she's basically leading them. She even has to act as their eyes for a little bit because she's the only one who can see Aslan. So they are quite literally following her at that point, and she is literally guiding them. In Prince Caspian, we also see it with Caspian's nurse, although that way it's of course done in more of a intellectual or in some ways even spiritual guide, in that she's the one who kind of teaches Caspian about Narnia initially and about Aslan, and that's how he finds out a lot of this stuff originally. Dr. Cornelius is the person who gives him more in-depth knowledge, I would say, but the nurse is the one who kind of opens that door for him. In Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I would say that the instances of this coming up aren't quite as plot vital, but they are still there. In the Dufflepud section of the story, we see Lucy acting as a kind of sort of guide to the rest of the crew when she is the one to go up and try and break the spell on the Dufflepuds to find out what's going on, and she's the one who comes down and tells them, hey, it's good, we're fine, this is what the scenario actually is. And a more blatant use of this trope is later on in the book when we meet Ramandu's daughter. She's called Ramandu's daughter, of course, in the books. I'm going to call her Liliandil because that's the only name I've actually heard used for her, which, yeah, I wish C.S. Lewis had given her name, but oh well, we're just going to go with Liliandil. She is a very, very blatant example of this, I would say. She is quite literally a guiding light. She's the daughter of a star and she literally glows. Hey guys, so as I was editing this, I remembered that she actually doesn't glow in the book. They made her glow in the movie, but she does not glow in the book. Instead, she carries a candle, so in a way she is still a guiding light, just not quite in quite a physiological sense, I would say. She also is the one who tells them, hey, this is what this place is, this is what the table is, that knife, oh yeah, that was definitely the White Witches. No, these men did not fall asleep because of the food, it's because they tried to grab the knife and fight each other. So, yeah, she's a very, very obvious example of that. Now, in The Silver Chair, I think we have probably the most plot-centric example of this, and that is Jill. Because with Jill, it's her first time in Narnia, but she's the one who gets all of the signs from Aslan. She's the one who has to tell the others, this is where we're supposed to go, roughly. This is what we're supposed to be looking for. Aslan wants us to do this. Like, she has a very, very direct guiding role in the story. The next book to be released, Horse and His Boy, I would say this is a much more subtle presence in that book. Aravis is the largest female role in the book, with Hwin as a close second, and Aravis, I would say, isn't really a leader. She does strike out on her own. She's not a helpless damsel, far from it, but she is not a guide. Likewise, we do see both Susan and Lucy in this book, and neither of them, I would say, have this role. They're both kind of more instigators of different plot elements that happen, especially Susan. Lucy, they're fairly mild, but they are still there, and I'm so glad she's there because it's really cool seeing her in that context. However, we do see this trope coming up with both Quinn, and surprisingly, Lazareline, who, if you don't remember who that is, because she's a fairly minor character, is Erebus's quite giddy, frivolous friend that she runs into in Tashbaan. So with Quinn, we see this because she's the one who comes up with the plan on how to get them through Tashbaan. She also is often the voice of reason and to kind of calm everyone down and get them to think through what's going on. So she acts as kind of an overseeing guide. She's not as direct as a lot of the other instances, but she is still a guide, I would say. And with Lazareline, she embodies this in that she's the one who helps Erebus get out of Tashbaan with the horses, and she is the one who takes Erebus to the gate that she uses to escape. It's kind of funny to think of Lazareline in this context, actually, because most of the time when she's with Erebus, Erebus is just annoyed. But she is actually a good friend, I would say, to Erebus, and she acts as a guide to her at this point. Now, the next book was Magician's Nephew. This is, of course, the first one chronologically, but it was the second last one to be released. And in this one, there's a few female characters. Most prominently, we see Polly, we see Diggory's aunt. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name right now. We see Helen, who becomes the first queen of Narnia, and we briefly see Diggory's mother. And then, of course, there's Jadis, who I will talk about in a minute. Of these women, most of them are fairly minor roles, with the exception of Polly, of course, who is one of the biggest parts in the entire book. And she does embody parts of this trope, but not in so much of a direct way as we've seen in previous ones. She does pass through the portals into the Wood Between the Worlds before Diggory does, so in that way she kind of acts as a guide, but it's almost more as a target to follow, I guess. But she does do it a little bit. She also tries to act as something of a emotional guide for Diggory when they're in Charn, in that she tries to get him to not ring the stupid bell, among other things, and things would have been very different if he'd listened to her, but Polly isn't perfect, she makes mistakes too. So yeah, and the books deal with all of that, and yeah, so I'm not gonna go into that right now. But one tidbit about Polly that I actually forgot until I reread the books about a year or so ago was that Polly grows up to be a writer, which in a way is a sort of intellectual guide of sorts. I mean, it depends on what she writes, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if a lot of the stuff she learned in Narnia came into effect in her books, so I'm going to include it. Oh, and little sidebar, I find it kind of interesting that Polly is the one that C.S. Lewis makes an author, because Diggory Kirke, the adult Diggory Kirke, the one that we meet in Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, was inspired by J.R.R. Tolkien, which I find wonderful. So Tolkien makes a sort of semi-cameo in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and actually there is a character in Lord of the Rings whose voice is very, very inspired by C.S. Lewis's. I'm not sure how much his personality was, but his voice definitely is, and that character is Treebeard. So if you're reading Lord of the Rings right now, or if you have read it, yeah, Treebeard's voice was inspired by C.S. Lewis. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. So the final book in the series is The Last Battle, and that has fewer female characters than a lot of the others, but it has several examples of this trope coming up. So the first instance we see of this theme coming up in Last Battle is with a Dryad who appears very early on in the story. I believe she's the first woman we see, actually. And she's, in one scene, she appears and dies, like, within a few minutes of appearing. And she is basically there to tell the king, this is what's happening. Trees are being cut down, dryads are being killed. Like, you have to go save your people, basically. So, yeah, she literally appears for the specific purpose of acting as a guide. It's not put in those words, but that's basically what she's doing. And the largest female role in this book goes to Jill, of course. And although her leadership role or guiding role in this book isn't as blatant as it was in Silver Chair, it is still there. It's actually stated pretty explicitly that she has the best woodscraft out of her and her two companions, Tyrion and Eustace. So when they are sneaking around in the middle of the night, she actually is literally guiding them because she's able to find the best path and find direction, and also move very, very quietly, which is great and becomes very, very handy. And then as one final example of this theme coming up, in a positive sense, I'm going to talk about another sense in a minute, we see both Polly and Lucy acting as guides in Aslan's country near the end of the book. Especially Lucy, because she spends quite a bit of time explaining things to Tyrion and catching him up and telling him what's going on. Polly kind of more just interjects, but she does kind of have a bit of an older, wiser member of the group vibe going on, and I kind of love that. So those are what I would call just the regular guides, but there is also a bit of a dark guide aspect that comes up in Narnia as well. There are two notable examples of this, although I'm sure it probably pops up at other times too. Now, the two direct examples are pretty obvious. The first one is Jadis, the White Witch. She is attempting to act as a guide at several points throughout the books when we see her. In Magician's Nephew, she is the one who instructs the children about Charn, about magic in a lot of ways, because Uncle Andrew's knowledge is rudimentary, shall we say. And so she is the one who kind of tells them the reality of what's actually going on. And then once they're in Narnia, she again attempts to act as a guide to Shasta. But it's notable that in both cases, she's trying to lead them, mainly him, but them, down a dark path. She's trying to get them to do something wrong. In the first instance, it's basically the equivalent of trying to help her take over the world, in trying to get her to Earth. In the second instance, it's her attempting to get Shasta to destroy any hope of protecting Narnia from her, and also of saving his mother. Well, she would survive, but yeah, there would be really bad results from that if he'd done things her way, which are in the book. And then again, in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, we see her doing the same thing more successfully with Edmund. She attempts to lure him in and to steer him towards a specific path. Essentially, she's trying to control him. She's trying to use him as a tool, but she is guiding him. It's just in a very scary way. Even in Prince Caspian, we kind of momentarily see her influence. Not her person, because she's dead, but her influence and her memory kind of almost posthumously guiding a couple of characters to try and bring her back. So she is intense. She is the closest thing I would say to a overarching villain in the Narnia series, especially since both the White Witch and Tash in the final book from The Last Battle kind of are representing the same real-life being in the Christian faith, of course, which is Satan. So in some ways the White Witch is still acting as the antagonist in The Last Battle, except not really in a kind of meta sort of way, but anyway. Okay, that is correct. Okay. The other example of a dark guide that we have in the series is in The Silver Chair, the Lady of the Green Kirtle. I'm just going to call her the Witch, but that's who she is. She is very much a dark guide, I would say. She literally guides Rillian north. She kidnaps him, but she's magically enchanted him and is leading him that way. And then she tries to lure the children into staying in her dark world forever. So again, a pretty direct example of a dark guide. And I also think it's interesting to note that while we never get it confirmed, several of the Narnian characters believe that the witch in Silver Chair has a connection to Jadis, because Jadis actually runs into the north after Magician's Nephew, and she stayed there for centuries between Magician's Nephew and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and that's where Lady of the Green Kirtle comes from. And there's just some very distinct similarities in how they work and what kind of magic they use. So yeah, I personally think that's probably accurate. The witch probably had some kind of group of followers or something in the north during her time up there, and the Lady of the Green Kirtle is one of them. Either she has been trained by the witch's followers, or she was actually one of the witch's followers, which I think is totally possible. She can turn into a snake. There's no reason she might not be way older than she looks. But anyway, that's all conjecture. So this is kind of all I have for now on discussing the gender dynamics of the Chronicles of Narnia. I might touch on this again at a later date because it is a topic I really care about, but I don't really want to do that unless I know I can do it properly. So I'm just gonna leave it at this for now. If you guys have any topics that you would like me to discuss, please let me know. I can't promise I'll do them, but I do look at the comments and I would love to get some ideas because I really like doing these videos and I like talking with you guys about this stuff. Have a wonderful day and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.